Welcome to the Pump Take Sports Show. We are back with our weekly football segment. Today we're doing a pretty cool one. We're doing a tier list here of every first overall pick dating back to 1998, the year before both of us were born. And we would rank Joe Burrow, but we're not going to rank him right now because, it's too early to say, the injury, all those things. So we're just going to go right up to Kyler Murray, all the way back to Peyton Manning. So a lot to cover between those years. But the first one would be Peyton Manning. So back in 98.
Yeah, this one's a pretty straightforward one. One of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I think you virtually just have to rank him in your top 5. He's pretty much going to be the easiest one to rank here because he's, automatic S, the gold standard for what you want out of a first overall pick, pretty much. And It's crazy because, obviously, for anyone that knows their NFL history, there was a big debate at the time between Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf.
Yeah.
You kind of had what you have a lot these days is the debate between, the guy who makes all the right decisions, looks good in college, that kind of thing, versus like the raw talent, which is what Ryan Leaf had.
Yeah.
Ryan Leaf ended up going number 2 overall to the Chargers. Peyton went number 1, and the rest, as they say, is history. One of them went on to win 2 Super Bowls and, multiple regular season accolades, and, basically he's a Hall of Famer.
First
and the
ballot.
other one,
Yeah,
first ballot. Yeah. So pretty straightforward stuff there.
Yeah, very straightforward. He's the guy that every franchise is targeting in the draft. So next up, we've got the face of the Browns, Bill Baker Mayfield. Actually, there was like 35 faces of the Browns, but this is
exactly
who they thought the face of the Browns was going to be. And here he is, Tim Couch.
This is like the start. This is like the start of the faces of the Browns thing, because this is like right around the time when the Browns. So obviously the original Browns became the Ravens, and then I think it was in like somewhere in the mid '90s, the Browns came back as a franchise shortly after the Ravens relocated to Baltimore, I think in like 1996. So yeah, the Browns when they came back as an expansion team, their first pick was, I believe, Tim Couch. And like you said, he was like projected to be the franchise for the Browns, but obviously that didn't work out. As far as like when we look back at the history of the Browns quarterbacks, like who they had over the past 20 years, Tim Couch definitely is not the worst, but you're not setting a very high bar with the guys there. So it's difficult to say. He was definitely far from the worst. He had some good moments. He did make the all rookie team back in 1999, and he was good he was decent, I should say, in college at Kentucky. So I don't know if we're measuring him up to Browns quarterbacks, he'd be in like the A or B tier, maybe even the S tier.
But the unfortunate thing is that's not the scale in which we measure these guys. So
that's not what we're doing. So honestly, it's tough because you don't want to be mean to old Couchy here, because he, as we know, he was not put in an enviable position being drafted to the Browns. He would not be the last guy to come to the Browns and be basically set up to fail. So it's tough to rank him too hard. I think based on what he did for an expansion franchise, it's respectable. But at the end of the day, we're ranking him as a number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
I think you got to put him in the D tier.
Yeah, I was thinking between the D tier and the C tier only because he wasn't the worst of the Browns. But it's a fair point that that's not what we're measuring on here. Look at some of the other guys that we have. Peyton Manning already in the S tier, and now we go to Tim Couch. So it's hard to really compare guys on a year-to-year basis. But I agree. I was going to put him in C tier for a little Couchy, but D is where he's got to fall, unfortunately.
I'd like to put him there because it's like we've said, it's not great. But when you look at like the guys that went behind him, like you got Donovan McNabb was a much better quarterback who went number 2 to the Eagles at the time. You had some like Hall of Famers like Champ Bailey go behind him. And when we're looking in that context, you kind of have to put him in the D tier.
Especially when there's another Browns quarterback on this list that's going to be ranked higher. So next up, we've got, can you remind me of this guy's name again?
It's Courtney Brown. Courtney Brown, defensive end for the Cleveland Browns.
So clearly not going to be very ranked very high.
Honestly, in the history of Browns busts, Courtney Brown is one of the biggest busts in franchise history. So that tells you a lot about this guy. There's not really much more to say about him.
Yeah, I think you said
he only played around 5 or 6 years in the NFL. He did, like Tim Couch, make the all-rookie team, but it was virtually all downhill from there. He only eclipsed 6 sacks once in his entire career. And he was never an impact player for the Browns, obviously. And like I said, to be listed as one of the biggest busts in Browns franchise history, that's an accomplishment. Exactly. So for me, he's in the D tier.
Me as well. And you know what? It's, as a first overall pick, I think your floor should be you carve out at least a 10-year NFL career where you're just a role player. That should just be what your floor is. This guy didn't even accomplish that. Wasn't even in the league for half of that. So that's a D ranking. So next up, we have our actual exciting one here, other than Couchy, and I already forgot his name, to be honest with you. The other guy in the D tier. We've got
not super memorable.
Michael Vick is here, number 7, the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, probably the best first overall pick in their franchise history. I would have to go back far, far back. Did they draft Primetime first overall, or he left? Did he not?
I think he went 2nd overall, and I can't remember. I honestly can't recall if he went to he played on a whole bunch of different teams. I believe he was drafted to the Falcons. But I think he went 2nd overall, I want to say.
I feel like that sounds right, because I had watched some sort of, 30 for 30 ESPN thing on him, and I feel like 2nd was where he was picked. But that being said, Michael Vick is here. And, for me, when you look at the rest of the guys on this list, I mean, Vick is, other than, the dogfighting stuff that, came out about him, he had pretty much an incredible NFL career from start to finish. I mean, the guy was their franchise quarterback for a long time. And if you get a franchise QB, for half a decade, that's, what more can you ask for with a first overall pick? Is that not what they drafted him to be?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say that you can say about Michael Vick that hasn't already been said. He's one of the most iconic players in league history for what he brought at the time at the quarterback position. Even now, only Lamar Jackson has really matched just the sheer athleticism and speed and electricity that he brought from the quarterback position.
He kind of changed the quarterback position a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if I'd say he changed it. I think he should have changed it if NFL teams were more prepared to use him and make better use of his skill set. I think he absolutely would have changed it. I think he was way ahead of his time in that sense, because when he came into the league, a lot teams were ready to just throw him into a standard NFL offense and just be a pocket passer.
That was the days before the mobile quarterback existed, really.
Yeah, I mean, there was mobile guys, but they were in the realm of they were in the realm of guys like, can't believe I'm blanking on this name. Who's the other Hall of Fame 49ers quarterback? Not Joe Montana, but Steve Young. Guys like that, that were mobile, but that was just like a trick in the bag. Whereas Michael Vick, he was a different level of athlete.
Vick was a different.
But they just kind of forced him into being a regular NFL quarterback, which he was not. He had the ability to score with his legs or with his arm in one single play.
No, you're right, man. I think he was the first, there was mobile quarterbacks, but he's now the archetype that young kids like Lamar come into the league, and kind of, he's the archetype of the mobile QB. If you were to play my career on Madden and you were to select mobile QB, Mike Vick would be the prototype guy that you're trying to
absolutely. Yeah, he set the trend. And obviously, there's some things to talk about off the field with the dogfighting, the dogfighting legal issues that he ran into towards the end of his career as a Falcon, and when they chose Matt Ryan in the draft. But I think in terms of the on the field football, he was kind of dealt a shitty hand, because if offenses were to be designed around him, like say the Ravens have done with Lamar Jackson, I think he would have had a lot more success. Not that he didn't have success on the field. That's not what I'm trying to say. He obviously
could have been
was a Pro Bowl caliber player, but exactly, he could have been better. And, who knows, he could have won a few Super Bowls if everything went his way, because that's the caliber of player he was. So with that in mind, I think we have to put him in the A tier. That's my personal opinion, because when you're factoring in just the sheer level of talent and the adversity that he faced and overcame throughout his career, to be, one of the most iconic players in league history, I think you just have to put him in there, despite, it was a rocky road on the way, but
absolutely,
there's no denying Michael Vick as a player.
No, absolutely not. And when you look in the S tier, I think just based on who we have sitting there, you're kind of looking at MVPs and Super Bowls, and Vick just doesn't have that hardware, even though he was, he's in the A tier, like he's an incredible player, But when you look at the S tier and you're up there with the Peyton Mannings of first overall picks that change your franchise completely, and the history books, it's just a little different. Next up, we have Houston Texans QB, David Carr, not Derek Carr.
Yep.
David Carr.
No, not quite. No, they are the brother of Derek Carr.
Yeah. So David Carr, I'm going to be honest, I don't know too much about this. Once again, this is when we were just little toddlers running around back then. But David Carr, I don't know too much, but I know that he was not too good for the Texans.
No, I can talk a little bit about him because, little known fact, he was on the Giants backup quarterback for Eli Manning when they won the Super Bowl back in 2007. So he has Super Bowl champion on his resume.
Yeah,
and
so that means he's
because of it
here, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? We know that there's another number one overall pick on this list that really deserves the accolades for that. So in any case, David Carr, we want to talk about Michael Vick not being drafted to an enviable position. At least he had some things around him in Atlanta, whereas and his game was designed to, sort of be, he could make some things happen without things around him. But David Carr, he was drafted into, one of the worst situations ever. The Texans were a new expansion franchise at the time. They had the number one overall pick, so they elected to try and take their franchise quarterback, but things just did not go well for him. He had a reputation as one of the most sacked quarterbacks ever. At the time, he was just getting absolutely beat down by a horrible Houston offensive line. At the time, it was just a recipe for disaster there. Say what you want about David Carr, the player. He had an okay college career, especially in his senior season at Fresno State. And which is really what elevated him to be drafted first overall. But in the NFL, his game was not suited to carry a franchise like the Texans, who had no talent on offense around him. And, we'll never really know what he could have been if everything went the right way. But I get a sneaking suspicion, he would have probably been a career backup regardless, just because of, what he was able to produce in the NFL, even in spite of the poor talent around him. I think you can look at that and isolate that play on its own and say, he never exceeded 16 passing touchdowns. He always had double-digit interceptions in years where he, actually started a significant number of games. So like you said, I know that you were saying you don't know too much about him, and I can hardly blame you because he did not leave a big legacy, unfortunately. So for me, he's in the D tier.
Yeah, me as well. I think doesn't he run like a quarterback school now, or like he does some sort of quarterback? I
believe he's an analyst.
He does some sort of thing with QBs now, which, he's paved out a career out of his ability as a QB. So good for him. If it didn't work in the NFL, it can work off the field. Next up, we've got Carson Palmer. You know what? Long-time NFL player, played all the way to the time that, we grew up and watched him play all the way until pretty recently, actually. So, carved out a long career, had some success along the way. And to me, this is definitely going above the C tier. I don't know about you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. With Carson Palmer, he's unquestionably above the C tier. I think you can have a conversation putting him in either the A or the B tier. I think when you look at the totality of his career, he started out obviously in Cincinnati, where he was drafted, and he was never in. He had some good receivers there with Chad Ochocinco, of course. But the way it ended there was very similar to what we see a lot these days, where he just kind of wanted out of Cincinnati. They weren't building a real big contender around him. He went to the Oakland Raiders. He was not great, but when he got to the Arizona Cardinals, and they picked him up, and he got to work with Bruce Arians and play with Larry Fitzgerald, close to his prime. That's when we really saw Carson Palmer play his best football. So when you're looking at the whole of his career, it was pretty up and down, especially early. But towards the end, he really came around, almost made a Super Bowl, took the Cardinals to the playoffs. He was second team All-Pro back in 2015. So, once he got to work with work with Bruce Arians, things really turned around. And even when you look at some of his earlier seasons in Cincinnati, he did flash some big potential there. So looking at that, taking everything into account, I think you have to put him in either the A or the B tier. Now it's tough because I think when you look at his resume in a nutshell, you're like, okay, that's a B tier resume. But when you think about what it takes to be an NFL quarterback for that many years and stick around for that long, it takes quite a lot. Not a lot of players can say they did what Carson Palmer did throughout NFL history.
No, and that's why I think I would argue to put him in the A tier, just based on having some playoff success and almost making it to a Super Bowl. That in itself, and he delivered, pretty much what the Bengals could have expected him to deliver to them, right? Like, how much can you expect out of a guy after 5 years of him just delivering, what he is to you? So I think we should put him in the A tier just based on the fact that he was a long-term player who had some success in his career.
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, I'm 100% behind that. I could see you going either way, depending on what perspective you take. But when you look at the stats he put up and how long he was in the league, I think the A tier is a good spot for him. So I will agree with that.
So next up, the man needs no introduction. Number 10, that's Eli right. Manning. 2 Super Bowls, beat Brady twice, face of the New York Giants. This is hard not to put in the S tier.
Yeah, for me especially, I'll admit there's not many things that I can't be impartial about. Even the New York Giants themselves today, I'm not a very biased person when it comes to my favorite team. I'll tell it like it is. But to my favorite athlete of all time, Elijah Manning, I'm not going to mince words. I'm very biased when it comes to him. So, but even when you're not looking at this from a biased perspective, you look at the numbers. What we were just saying about Carson Palmer. If we're putting him in the A tier, Eli Manning did the same thing. He stuck around, started so many consecutive games for the Giants over the course of, his what was it, like 16, 17-year career. That is hard to do on its own, not only to stay healthy, but to just stick around in the league, especially for one franchise. And then you add on top of that, the 2 Super Bowls against what most people consider to be the greatest quarterback of all time. Yeah. You add on top of that the franchise passing records, the league passing records, where he's in top 10 in all passing categories that are relevant. Multiple playoff league records and franchise records. I don't know what else you could ask for out of a number 1 overall pick. There's not too many number 1 quarterbacks you can point to in league history that have had the success that Eli Manning did. So I think you have to put him in the S tier right there with his brother.
You're absolutely right. I don't think anyone would argue with you. And if they would, they can leave it in the comments and we can take it up with them there. Now that I look at the list and who's left to go on the tier list, I'm thinking about moving Carson down to a B. I liked his A. It's our tier list. We can do whatever we want. I liked him in the A category, but I just think he's more of a B player because I think Vick at his best was better than Palmer at his best. So it's
tough
for the dice, but I'm gonna put Carson in the B tier for now because I think
if there was a tier in between A and B, I think that's where he would go.
Yeah.
But if you have to decide, I think I would lean B also. There's definitely a good argument for A, but I'm not going to argue with moving him down to B.
Yeah, any Cardinals and Bengals fans that are watching, they'll see that he was in the A and then he was in the B, so he's an AB. He's an A1, so he's in the middle of both of them. Next up, we've got the year that my favorite quarterback was drafted, Aaron Rodgers, but it wasn't Aaron Rodgers to go first overall. It was Alex Smith to go first overall to the San Francisco 49ers. Boy, did they make a mistake not picking number 12. They got a good player. They got a great player. But they could have had the Cali kid, Aaron Rodgers, probably lead them to some Super Bowls. But instead they got Alex Smith. Nothing wrong with that pick. He was a good player for a long time. Yep. The Alex Smith that I remember the most is Alex Smith in Kansas City. And you know what? He was middle of the road, but similar to what I was saying earlier, if you're a guy who carves out a decade-long NFL career, and is successful along the way, puts up some good numbers. He won Comeback Player of the Year this year. Has done a lot in his veteran years. I mean, I think that's B tier, or I think it's B tier. That's where I would.
I would 100% put him in B tier. For a long time, Alex Smith had some great accomplishments. Obviously, coming back from that huge injury this past season for the Washington football team is extremely impressive. He's done some great things in Kansas City. He was an MVP candidate at one point in Kansas City. playing with those weapons. He played a big role in helping Patrick Mahomes adapt to the NFL. Obviously, going to the 49ers, he wasn't exactly what they dreamed of, especially when you look at who the quarterback that went later in the first round. He wasn't exactly what they were looking for, but he did, he did get them to the playoffs a few times. He and Colin Kaepernick kind of swapped in and out here and there at that point. But in any case, I think you look at Alex Smith's career and you're looking at it and you're thinking that was a very solid player for the number 1 overall pick. When we look at some of the other quarterbacks that went first overall coming up and including Tim Couch and David Carr, he is definitely a far cry above those guys. So I think B tier is the perfect spot for Alex Smith.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If B tier of first overall picks was, if you looked it up in the dictionary, Alex Smith might look back at you, because I think that's exactly what he is on our tier list here.
Yeah.
So next up, the Texans have quite a few first overall picks. This is their second one so far, but they'll have one more along the way. Mario Williams, 2006 first overall pick. I would say that's a C or a D. Probably a C. I don't know too much. Do you have the stats on you there?
So he had some good seasons in his career, especially early on. And then when he, after he went to the Buffalo Bills, he kind of picked up his career a little bit. I don't know. It's tough to say because he had a very short career, relatively speaking. I mean, obviously defensive ends, you can't expect them to last too long.
Yeah.
But he was only in the league for 10 or so years. Usually you see, really good defensive ends last longer than that. So I don't know. It's tough to say. I think I would probably, because I'm in the same boat as you, I didn't really watch Mario Williams too much. When the Texans were pretty irrelevant when I was growing up watching football. So I don't know. To put him in the B tier, I think, because I don't want to just look at the stats and be like, okay, yeah, he had some good sack years, therefore he's in the B tier.
I mean, it wasn't also, man, just I'm looking while we're doing this. I'll just name off some notable players just that were drafted after him, which, matters in the grand scheme of being a first overall pick. Vince Young was drafted after him. Jay Cutler was drafted after him. Antonio Cromartie, Tom Bahali, Jonathan Joseph, D'Angelo Williams.
You know what? Let's put him in the B tier. Just looking at his accolades, he went to the Pro Bowl 4 times. Say what you will about the Pro Bowl. I certainly do. I don't like the way that it's voted for. It's more of a popularity vote, but an accomplishment to go 4 times nonetheless. He was first team All-Pro once and he was a second team All-Pro twice. That is hard to do. Combined with the sack numbers, and what we're looking at, I think it's way too harsh to put him in the C tier. I think the B tier is a good spot. No, obviously, when you're comparing him to some other edge rushers, let's say in the NFL, he's not going to stack up with the best of the best. But as far as number 1 overall picks go, there's definitely a lot worse. I think B is a good spot for him.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, man. And I didn't know we went to the Pro Bowl 4 times. And it was interesting. There was actually a lot of good second-round players in that 2006 draft. Whitworth was one of them. Devin Hester was another one. So some cool second-round picks came out of that draft class that kind of carved out great NFL careers. So next up, we have the biggest bust. This is going to the D tier.
Yeah, if there was a lower tier, you would probably put him in there.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's Jamarcus Russell?
Yes.
Jamarcus Russell, he's the guy who his coach gave him an empty DVD case. I think this is this guy. I could be wrong,
exactly. Yeah, they gave him tape to watch, and there was nothing in it.
Yeah, an empty tape.
And he claimed that he watched it.
He comes back to practice and he says, "Yeah, coach, I watched the tape. I'm ready to go." And coach said, "Yeah, that was a blank tape, idiot." So,
he's the quintessential bust. And there's another story behind this. I mean, there's so many stories with Jamarcus Russell because he is, a historic bust. But there was a story I remember watching a video on it a few years ago, and I can't remember the details, so don't hold me to it. But the Raiders were in talks to acquire Aaron Rodgers from the Packers because at this point he was still behind Brett Favre. So the Packers didn't really know what they had with Aaron Rodgers, obviously, at that point. So what the Raiders' plan was to take Calvin Johnson who was, I believe, went second overall. He went just after Jamarcus Russell either way, and pair him up with Aaron Rodgers. Now, I think it's safe to say the Raiders would have preferred to do that than taking Jamarcus Russell. Pairing up probably two of the two most talented players at their respective positions with each other. Probably could have won a couple Super Bowls, at least competing for them if they did that.
It would have been the greatest quarterback wide receiver duo, probably arguably in history, if you pair those guys up. Instead, they get a guy that doesn't even want to watch film. So the classic story of talent can be there, but without hard work, you're going in the D tier, buddy.
Absolutely.
Next up, Kyle Long. Long-time tackle.
That's actually Jake Long. I don't actually know if Kyle Long and Jake Long are related. Kyle Long was the Bears guard.
Right. See, me as the NFC North fan growing up, I see Kyle Long, Jake Long. It gets confusing in my head. I just see a big fat tackle, and I have to think that it's one of the Long brothers. So Jake Long. Can you tell me about Jake Long a little bit?
Yeah, he was a good tackle. I always kind of found it weird. He had a pretty short career, relatively speaking. He had really high highs in his career. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler, 1-time first team All Pro, 1-time second team All Pro. He was on the All Rookie team. So he had some. I remember back in his prime, he was a really good tackle. But the weird thing is with tackles, you usually see, like, especially the really good ones, some pretty good longevity. Like you look at somebody like Andrew Whitworth, who is I think 3 or 4 years older than Jake Long is right now. He's still among the best tackles in the league.
Yep.
Right now, currently, and Jake Long retired 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting and tough to rank.
The year before.
What's that? Sorry.
Whitworth was a 2nd-round pick the year before this year. So
there you go. Yeah.
Like they're exactly drafted pretty much at the same time.
So you don't want to hold that against him too much because, like, you never really know the circumstances. Could have been injuries, could have been something personal. But it's kind of the same thing with Mario Williams, where you're questioning, like, why did they fall off so quick? And not only that, it's like, okay, they fell off so quick. That should be factored in because, when you look at somebody like Eli Manning, who played and had success in the league, and Peyton for that matter, for so long, you kind of have to factor in the shortness of their career. So for me, I mean, you got to probably put him in the B tier because, we're comparing the first overall picks here. And, in his prime, he was a really good offensive tackle. So I think that's where I would put him. If you have another spot.
I agree. I could also argue maybe to put him in the C tier just because you could say that he didn't change the franchise. And I think with the first overall pick, maybe it's just my philosophy on the pick, but it should be a franchise changing player. Like whether quarterback's really the only one that can change your franchise, but it's tough to get a tackle that doesn't last too long. And I don't know, I'm into the B tier, but I think he more
I see what you're saying
in the B, C tier of things, just when it comes to first overall picks, but let's just leave him in the B tier.
I think you're asking a lot for him to change your franchise as an offensive tackle.
No,
I see what you're saying. Like,
like maybe that's just me being unfair to the pick because I just think that like you just should take the best, most talented player in the class, and maybe that's my ignorance of the class. But I just feel like there was other guys maybe there that could have really done more.
No, you're right about that. Yeah, if we're ranking the actual pick, I would agree with you. They're like, the Dolphins could have taken somebody like Matt Ryan. Who went a couple picks later. Even like somebody like, I don't know, DRC maybe would have been a better pick in terms of positional value. But I don't know. When we're looking at the player, it's hard to put him in the C tier when he was actually pretty good as a tackle. But if you want to put him in the C tier, I actually would not dispute that.
Let's put him in the C tier just to get a guy in there. So we have a guy in every tier.
Okay.
Because moving into the next, 8 or 10 guys, these are all the ones that we really, were invested in the sport when they were playing and, drafted and all that stuff. So next up, we've got Matthew Stafford, former Detroit Lion. Feels weird to say, but former Detroit Lion. And to me, I'll just say it right away. I think his career's not over, obviously. So there's more time to go. But I think it's hard not to put this in an A tier for the Lions. They needed a guy to come in and be the quarterback. of the future. And Stafford was that for a very long time. You know, you can argue to say he didn't have the stuff around him to, to fully use his skill set. But I would argue that he was the best guy they could have gotten, and so to me, he's an A tier player, first overall.
I would argue that he is a B tier player for a number of reasons. First of all, I agree with you. I don't think you could have made a different pick, really, if you're the Lions. But, we're grading the player, not the pick. So with that in mind, when we're comparing the careers of these guys, I look at Matthew Stafford's career. He does have some impressive stats. And like you said, he was not drafted to the greatest spot to maximize, what he could do. But in terms of accolades, he only has one Pro Bowl. He does have a comeback player of the year on his resume. And when I look back, it's like, I don't know. He hasn't really accomplished much for as long as he's been in the league, and being in the Lions definitely hurts that. Yeah. And, he could prove this year when he gets to the Rams that, that was what was holding him back all along. But I can't in my own good conscience say that he's worth putting on the tier of Michael Vick, who, had the exact same complaints really with his career and to a much higher degree, because he was literally not put in a system that ever could maximize his skill set. Whereas, Stafford was just given bad defenses and bad coaching. I can't really put him on the same tier as Matthew Stafford or as Michael Vick personally. If you want to rank him in the A tier, I'm not going to complain because I'm not a Stafford hater.
You make a good point. It's tough when a guy's career is not over, right? And this is actually, it'll be interesting because this is the first time we've seen him in a situation where he's not being held back by the shit Lions who, never really helped him at all accomplish anything. But I think for the Lions, it was a good pick. I'm into putting him in the B tier. I think that's a good spot for him. And we'll see, as time goes on, he could prove he's definitely a B tier trending up, I think, rather than a B tier trending down. He would be a B tier guy that, depending on how the career ends, could definitely be in the A tier. So great pick for the Lions. One of the best picks that they've had in their franchise in a while. So next up, we've got Sammy Bradford. Poor guy, hurt a lot, never really played good, bounced around the league a whole bunch. The prototypical backup. Not great, not a great career here. Really tough to see that he was a first overall pick. Well, I knew he was a first overall pick, but really tough to just see his smiley face looking back at us here. And to know that it never really worked out for him, it's an unfortunate thing. Yeah,
I think there was a time in the league, especially when he was playing for Minnesota. Like he never worked out with the Rams. That's safe to say. That was a quick decision for the Rams to move on. Relatively speaking, they did not keep him past his first contract. Spent 1 year in Philly, did not have great success. But then that first year in Minnesota, when he was fully healthy, for the first time in a while, he actually had a pretty good season. Back in 2016.
Yeah.
I can't recall if Minnesota made the playoffs or not that year. I want to say they didn't, but
I don't think they did.
But either way, he had a really good season that year.
Maybe they did make the playoffs, but either way, I think we have to take into consideration the fact that the Rams were the team that drafted him with the number one overall pick. And number one overall picks, as we can see this year with Lawrence, just have so much value that when you don't get a guy to even make it past his first contract, to me, that's for the Rams' sake, it's a D. Maybe for the player's sake, it's a C, but it can't go higher than that.
For me, no, I would definitely put him in. It's tough because, you look at how his career went, and when you look at the whole picture, you're like, man, that wasn't very good. He really only had that one good season. But when you factor in what really held him back was injuries, because he was kind of in that tier of he was at one point a top 15 to 20 quarterback in the league.
Yeah.
And to put him in there with guys like Jamarcus Russell and David Carr, I don't think that's fair, because really the only reason why Sam Bradford would at absolute least be a quality backup right now if it wasn't for injuries, which you cannot say about Carr, Tim Couch, or Jamarcus Russell. So I would put him in the C tier just because, he showed when he was fully healthy and everything was around him, he was a decent quarterback. He was never going to be worth the number one overall pick.
It's tough to see for the Rams, just as Rams fans, knowing that number one overall pick was used on a guy that at his best didn't even play for your team. So yeah, man, I agree. A C is unfortunately where the guy's got to go. You feel bad. You feel bad for any player that injuries kind of derail their career a little bit.
For sure. And, I don't want to spend too much more time talking about Sam Bradford because injuries are the story of his career. He was never that great when he did play. So I think C is a fine spot.
Yeah. Next up, another guy who unfortunately did deal with some injury stuff lately, but definitely peaked for the organization at a time when they needed it. Cam Newton, first overall pick, number one Superman. You all know who Cam Newton is. To me, Cam, it's tough because they had playoff success.
I know where I'd put him.
See, obviously he's between A and B for me, and I'm going to put him in the A.
You think?
Yeah, okay. I mean, maybe too liberal with the A's. It's tough. He was so good for Carolina when he was good. Like when Carolina was doing well, he was not only the face of the franchise, he was kind of a little bit turning into the face of the league. Like when you look back at like what he was for, like he put the franchise on the map a little bit.
Yeah, so
you have to consider
how I look at it is, I mean, he won an MVP. Very few players on this list can say that. I think only Peyton can. Too. So when you keep that in mind, that definitely has a significant weight in things, but also it was a huge outlier for his career. I'm a Cam fan. I still believe Cam can be a serviceable quarterback to this day, despite all the injuries and things that have not gone his way. He was a first-team All-Pro. He is an MVP, three-time Pro Bowler, Offensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. That's all great, and that's all in his prime. When you look at it, though, it's another thing where injuries just sort of caught up with him and his style of play, and he one way or another, he's not the same player that he was. And even in his peak, his peak was arguably S tier, but his peak was very short-lived.
It was.
And that one season where he won MVP, threw 35 touchdowns, ran for probably another 10 touchdowns, that was really good. But when we look at his whole career, I don't think we can really put him in the A tier. I think he fits right in with a guy like Stafford. He's similar to Stafford in the sense that
the hill I die on, because the thing with Cam.
Oh, you want to put him in the A tier?
Yeah, because I just think he changed. Like Cam Newton was at his peak. He was, if you look at the B tier for a sec, it's like Carson Palmer, Alex Smith, Stafford. Great players, definitely B tier first overall picks. Cam really changed that franchise. You can argue not for the long run, which is what hurts him. But like you said, his peak was arguably S tier. I mean, they almost had a perfect season. Like the way Carolina was perceived around the league was completely different. Remember when they had Steph Curry banging the drum and like everyone was getting loud, and it was a really big thing for that organization. From a business perspective, he probably changed everything for Carolina. He was the reason that Carolina was on the map and good. And I think like an MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, just everything about Cam as a whole, it's tough to say because, he didn't play. He's still not with the Panthers now. But to me, like, I'll die on the hill. People in the comments can roast my ass, but to me, he's an A tier.
It feels weird being on this side of the debate because I mean, as you know, I've always been a Cam fan. Mm-hmm. Like I've always stuck up for him when people were hating on him after the Super Bowl. And like, even now, like I said, I still believe he can be a decent quarterback. So it feels weird to be arguing this, but I'm just thinking from the perspective, he's like kind of the inverse of the Stafford, Alex Smith, Carson Palmer guys, where it's like they just kind of were steady their whole career and were never really great. They had like flashes of greatness, but they weren't very long-lived.
No.
Whereas Cam had like one full season of being elite, and then the rest of it is like, you can only pick out a couple, like one or two other seasons where he was really even close to that. So it's really hard to put him in the A tier when you look at that, even though, factoring in injuries and like how that played a role and, all that in mind. So if you want to factor in like the outside of things and like how like the cultural influence that one season had and like the ripple effects it had, I think you can definitely make a strong argument for putting him in A. I'm just kind of looking at his whole career.
No, I hear you.
I mean, if you're factoring in influence, which we kind of did with Michael Vick, I think you can make a strong argument to put him in A. So I won't dispute you if that's the case.
I mean,
I'm just making my case for B.
No, I hear you, man. The lucky thing about being the guy with the mouse is that I can put him in A. And I don't know, man. I just, not to just keep beating a dead horse here, but Cam Newton changed football at the time. He not the actual game, just the NFL, like what the NFL was as a business and all that stuff. Like Cam was exciting. He was great at his peak. And I still think about those Cam Panthers days, and it brings me historical football fan warm and fuzzies. It was in the area, with the Legion of Boom and all that. It was good stuff. So I'm going to throw him in the A tier. Next up, Andrew Luck, the retired poor soul who injuries also, I guess it was injuries, but he didn't really say it was totally injuries. He just kind of wanted to step away. But Andrew Luck, first overall pick. To me, he was great for a long time with the Colts. The unfortunate thing is he doesn't play for them anymore. But I would argue that, I mean, at his best, he was definitely better than the guys in the B tier. And so
absolutely,
based on what I was saying about Cam and putting Cam in the A tier, I think Luck definitely is an A tier.
Yeah, for me, if you're putting Cam in the A tier, you have to put Luck in the A tier because it's exactly like you said. When he played, he was playing better than the guys in the B tier, and he was playing winning football on top of that. Like Stafford had at times better numbers than Andrew Luck did, but he was never leading teams to the playoffs like Andrew Luck did. And obviously they never got to the promised land. But when Andrew Luck played 15, 16 games, whenever he did, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. When you factor in that, he would probably still be doing that if he wasn't for injuries.
Especially
it's
with
really hard not to
finally giving the ghost of Andrew Luck a good offensive line, which he never really had for a portion of his career. But yeah, I think we're in agreement with that. A tier Andrew Luck, that just makes sense. Next up, Eric Fisher, tackle for the Chiefs. He's been there forever. Great player. Not much to say here other than I think he is a B.
Yeah, it's tough for me because, I think his career has sort of been vaulted into a B tier in recent years because of the success of the Chiefs. Yeah. And he's been a lot better than he has been over the course of his career. I don't want to totally discredit him. But, for a long time, he was considered people were wondering why the Chiefs were still hanging on to him because I guess it is hard to find even average offensive tackle play, but that's really all he was giving you. At his best days, he was giving you average offensive tackle play, and at his worst days, he was pretty terrible. And then recently, he's played better, and the Chiefs have been better. So that's kind of saved his reputation as a first overall pick.
Yeah.
For me though, I can't say he's better than Jake Long. I still disagree with Jake Long being put in C on its own. But I definitely can't say that Eric Fisher is better than Jake Long. He doesn't have near the accomplishments
that's fair. He did make
Jake
2
Long
Pro Bowls, but I think Long made 4, as you were saying.
So yeah, he made 4, and he also made all pro teams on top of that.
I guess if we put him in C, Eric Fisher would also have to be in C, just because of the Super Bowl championship, the success. You have to attribute a little bit of, not all, very small percentage, but a little bit of the success to the 2 tackles that they have in Kansas City. And,
definitely more so Schwartz, in my opinion.
Oh, no, absolutely. But a little bit of credit has to go his way.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't want to totally discredit him because he has turned his career around a little bit. For a long time, it was man, and the 2013 draft class overall it's definitely the worst draft class since I've been alive, but it's one of the worst in NFL history. You had some stars come away from that draft, but there wasn't a single starting quarterback that came away. So it's you factor that in as well, that they just got an average player that's been on their team this whole time from such a horrible draft class. That is another good thing to consider, that he was, comparing him to his own draft class. So I think C is fine. I still, Jake Long was definitely better. That's my one thing that I want to make clear there.
Yeah. No, I hear you for sure. I think that's a good spot for him. And I just don't really tackles are important, but I just don't really get selecting them with the first overall pick. It's just a personal thing. But next we've got 3-time Pro Bowler, Jadeveon Clowney. He was also a first-team All-Pro in his career. He used to be one of my favorite players. I always had him in our Madden leagues, and I just love the way he played. I remember everyone should go watch that hit that he lays in college where he just breaks through the line and just destroys that poor guy. It's just, hard-hitting player. To me, where does he go? He's not on the team anymore.
And I know where I'd put him, but I'll let you make your case first.
I would put him in the it's between C or B for me.
Well, I know I definitely put him in C. I think he's early in his career. He definitely had some flashes early in his career for the Texans, but he's been he's been very average since then. And also Jake Long has definitely been better.
Part of the excitement of him was just that he played in that J.J. Watt, Whitney Merciless, Jadeveon Clowney pass rush. So, yeah, I could see myself being swayed into putting him in the B because of that. So I'll stick with what you're saying there and put him in the C. I think that's a good spot for him.
It feels so weird to me to have Bradford in the same level as those guys. Yeah. It just is so hard to put him in the D tier because, he would probably, you can't really put him on the same level. I wish there was an F tier because I think if there was an F tier. What's that?
No, I wondered if I hit this button if it would build another row.
Yeah, because I would definitely shift all those guys down and have Bradford in his own D tier.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like he should be with those other guys.
No, I feel you, man. Especially now that the C tier actually kind of looks nice. It's tough to say that Brady deserves his spot in there.
But we'll just pretend that
We'll just pretend that there's a few sub tiers that we've explained as we've gone along here. Jameis Winston is next up here. So, I mean,
this is another one. We both love Jameis. So
C tier.
I want to put him in S tier personally, but
yeah, I love Jameis. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big Jameis believer. I always have been, but to me, doesn't play on the team. He was good for them for a while, but his peaks were never.
Now his peaks were at his peaks, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Exactly. It's his valleys that the reason why the Buccaneers moved on is because they just could not handle the lows. Because Jameis would on one play make a throw that only 5 quarterbacks in the NFL can make.
Yeah.
And then on the next play, he would throw it right to the defense.
Or run 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage and get sacked. There was no in between with him. So that's why I have to put him. He just didn't have the career that Stafford and Palmer had for their franchises. So to me,
I think C
is just kind of where he needs to go.
Exactly. And we'll say
the Bradford career even more hard to look at in this category now.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough though with the constraint we're given with this chart. But I will say, I want to make it clear, Jameis's career is not over.
Yeah.
He still has a lot to prove. Let me tell you, folks.
Oh, absolutely.
He's going to be vaulting up a few tiers.
In fact, we think he's going to be going to a certain team that wears the color blue. So check out our quarterback video if you want to know which one. Not going to tell you here, though. Next up, Jared Goff. Now, these guys are all so young now, we can't even rank them based on what they've done. This is purely just what I guess.
Projection, pretty much. Goff is a little bit, less to a degree because we've seen him for
Goff
so many
now
years
he's been moved on from. And so he was okay. He made it to a Super Bowl. That's something. Yeah. But, just the definition of a system quarterback, nothing really exciting about Goff other than, 2 years after he was drafted, people knew what Goff was.
Yeah.
They didn't have a gunslinger there. They didn't even have a Stafford there when I look at this chart because they just traded for a Stafford. So to me, Goff goes in the C tier. Just based on what he's done. And there's not too much left that I think he can prove in the NFL. So,
yeah, I think I have a higher opinion of him than it sounds like you do. And most people do probably just because I don't know. I don't really see, I'm going to get hate for this, but I don't really see too big of a difference between him and Stafford really. Mm-hmm. Obviously their tendencies are really different and everything. And Stafford is definitely better. I'm just saying he's not worth 2 first-round picks worth of difference. Is what I'm really what it comes down to. And I do think Goff can have some success in Detroit if the right things are around him. He's not a total shitty bust.
We'll see if Goff's ready to bite knees and tear ankles.
Yeah.
And do
I think
Detroit needs.
That's exactly what it comes down to. I know you're joking, but it is what it comes down to. If Goff is ready to put his head down and take being traded in stride, and, accept that for once in his career, he's not going to have everything, given to him on a silver platter.
Yeah.
If he can go out there and work for it, maybe he can prove people wrong. And I think, he has a good opportunity to do that. So we'll see. But I think for now, C is the right spot.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Next up, we've got Flash Garrett, one of the most exciting players that coming out of college that I remember looking into and kind of watching their tape. I was like, oh my God, this guy's a game breaker. You could argue he still is a game breaker in the NFL level. So to me, this is an A or a B. I think he's got so much more to do in the NFL. He's so young. He's not even, I don't even think, is he off that rookie contract or no?
No. Well, he's not yet technically because he was extended. Yeah. He was extended, so he's going to be pretty soon.
So to me, this is an A or a B. What would you lean towards? Because
absolutely A in my opinion. I think right off the bat, he's already proven that he was worth the number 1 overall pick. Yeah. I don't know. I just think you can't really argue with the production. He's still incredibly young. He's only 25 years old. Yeah. He won't turn 26 until the very end of December. He already has multiple double-digit sack seasons. Tons of pressures for the Browns. I mean, there's not really much more he can prove.
Just great seasons. One after the other. He just plays
one of the best edge rushers, if not. There's an argument to be made that he's the best edge rusher in the NFL right now. He certainly can become that if he's not already. I mean, what else is there to say? A tier has a chance if he goes on, to keep this trajectory. He has a chance to go into the S tier.
You're absolutely right.
It's hard to do for a non-QB.
Did you see that video of him playing basketball on Instagram? Oh
yeah, that was terrifying.
God. If I was a quarterback in that division, man, I would be shaking in my boots looking at how big that guy was. It was unreal.
It was ridiculous.
He looked like a monster, literally. It was unbelievable to see. So, crazy, unbelievable player. Yeah. Great.
The Browns definitely have their franchise there on defense, and I think they have it on offense, which is a good transition to move to the next number 1 overall pick.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
would be Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield. This is there's going to be some controversy with not what I don't think what we think, but some people don't like Baker. Some people really like Baker. Yeah. And there's kind of just this weird Baker divide among NFL fans.
He's a polarizing player for sure.
Yeah, polarizing player. I like Baker. To me, I think he's too young to put him anything below. To me, he's an A. To me, he's an A first overall pick. I think they've had playoff success now. Obviously, you're going to lose to the Chiefs. That's just going to happen. But I think they're still building something there. And I think Baker is a big part of that, and he needed to work out. And also, I think what needs to be considered with this A pick is that the Browns had missed on every single quarterback before him. And the pressure that he had on him to come in and change the franchise, which he ended up doing successfully, I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And that's why I would put him in the A tier.
That's a great point. Again, it feels weird, especially now, to kind of make the argument on the opposite side. Because as you know, I love Baker Mayfield. He was the first, when I was first getting into scouting college players, he was my first love. I compared him to Drew Brees coming out. I thought he was going to be a generational quarterback.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the second year, he didn't look so great, but in his first year, he broke the rookie record for touchdown passes, which was only broken by Herbert this past year. Yep. And in 2020, he led the Browns to the playoffs for the first time in forever and won a playoff game.
So
man,
think about how much
tough.
He broke the remember the thing they did with the Coors Light fridges where the Browns won a game and it was a huge deal. Think about everything that he's done for that franchise. If you were a Browns fan and you saw us put him below A, you would be pissed just based on what he's actually delivered to your franchise, from a Browns perspective, if that makes any sense.
Again, I can totally see that, and it feels so weird to be on the other side of it. But going back to what we said about Tim Couch, we're not ranking Browns quarterbacks. If we were, he would be SS plus tier. Mm-hmm. We're ranking first overall picks, and I think with his second year factored in, where he was pretty bad his second year. There's no two ways around it. And he's 2 really good seasons and 1 really bad season. Going forward, I would definitely have him in the A tier of quarterbacks. But in terms of first overall picks, when we're ranking these guys, I have a tough time putting him in the A tier yet. But at the same time, it's hard to dock him just because of the fact that he hasn't been in the league that long, because he can't control that,
Yeah, exactly, man.
He can't control, we can't control time. So I don't know. It's hard. I would probably put him in the B tier myself, even though I view him as an A tier caliber quarterback. It just is like, if we're ranking what's happened.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. What do you think?
I think he's A tier, just based on, I think that if you, to add on to what you're saying, that I agree he's an A tier caliber quarterback. Then you add in what he, like, being the pressure of being the Browns' first overall pick quarterback and all the jokes that came with that and all the pressure from the fan base that came with that. Then you take into consideration that he broke them out of their losing streak that was decimating their franchise and making them stink it up all the time. And then they had playoff success and won their first playoff game in forever. And that's all in 3 years. And I think going forward, he's only going to get better for the team. So I vote A tier personally.
All right. I'm not going to dispute that. Baker's my guy. I'm not going to.
Yeah. We're both Baker fans here, if you can't tell.
Yeah.
Baker's a good quarterback moving forward. And last but not least, number 1, Kyler Murray. Not number 1 in the rankings, just he wears the number 1. Lots of success in, his first couple years in the league. He's looked great, I think. And if you're going to put Baker, if we put Baker on the A tier, I think it's hard not to put Kyler on the A tier too, just with what he's shown Cardinals fans in his 2 years of playing.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's the same reason, because, I was just going to say, to me, he's an A tier caliber quarterback going forward.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just tough for me to look at. It's the same thing with Baker. It's like, as much as I love these guys going forward, and I would put, I would and have put a lot of money on them in the past. Would I be shocked? Would I be absolutely blown away if, what both of them end up being, we look back in 10 years and they're in the C or B tier? I would not be, anything could happen in the NFL. I'm just conditioned to understanding that. So it's tough because I definitely see them as A tier caliber guys going forward. But based on what they've shown so far and projecting forward, I have a tough time doing it, but I'm not going to argue too much because I do love both these guys.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you mean. It's just, do we want to take the optimistic or pessimistic route of the NFL quarterback future, right? That's kind of the question. We could look at it and say, well, based on Kyler's success in 2 years, therefore, if you project that out, he's bound to just be successful. The question is, can he be Mike Vick successful? Can he do that in his career? It's tough to say that he can. It's tough to say that he can't. Cardinals fans will tell you that he absolutely can. Seahawks fans will tell you that he sucks and that he can't do it. So it's a bit tough. I just think because we put Baker in the A tier, it's tough, man. It's too early to rank these guys at the end, right?
You can really just go. You can kind of just go back and forth on it all day. Yeah. I think if you want to put him in the A tier, I'm not going to argue with that. We'll both acknowledge, though, I think that they could go up or down in any of these tiers just because of how early it is in their careers.
No, you're absolutely right, man. This was a lot of fun to do. I think it's a really weird thing trying to rank first overall picks, because it's what did they do for the team? How did their career work out? How are their stats? What were their accolades? Are they too young? Are they too old? When did they retire? There's 20 million questions with all these guys about where to put them, but it was fun to do. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching it, listening to us talk about some football stuff here. And we'll be back, next time with more stuff to talk about and just more general football stuff. So thanks for watching. Let us know what you think about our tier list here, and where you would change things, because undoubtedly there's some takes in here that people are going to want to talk about. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.